Matthew chapter 21, we're in verses 18 here this morning. So we have these really nice grapevines in our backyard. We have 3 of them. And they are, our first year that we came, we moved into the house in September. They were pretty much ready to go. And I just remember Thea walking around just picking all the, not quite finished grapes off the grape and just eat them just constantly. She loved it. Last year we had sort of an experience though that slightly soured Nikki and I's relationship with our grapevines. Well, maybe not the grapes themselves, but the animals. See, we walked out expecting grapes. And instead the birds had gotten everything. Within one morning, they had picked the grapes clean. You go out and you're expecting fruit. You're expecting the promised land, bushels of grapes as you go by. And we got nothing. Stupid birds. They picked them clean. Well, by doing that, they pretty much declared war on us. So we'll be having regular sleepouts now as that comes to. But have you walked out to something and you expected it to have something and it didn't? Like, what's up with this? You go out to your car. You expect it to start, right? And it decides it doesn't want to. It looks like it should start. It acts like it wants to start, but it doesn't start. You go out to a set of grapevines and you go out and you're expecting grapes. It looks like there's some grapes, but no grapes. Punks. I'm not bitter about that at all. Well, Jesus, after the triumphal entry, where he goes and he's welcomed into Jerusalem, he's returning to the city, according to Matthew. And he walks up to a fig tree. And he goes underneath it, and he looks up. It looked like it was supposed to make figs. It's supposed to do something, but there was nothing there. The fig tree didn't produce figs. And Jesus responds in one of the most, can he do that? Sort of ways. He cursed the fig tree, and it began to wither. I don't know if you guys have ever done that to a plant. Nope. I do that to weeds all the time. I would be cursing weeds left and right from the backyard, but it doesn't happen. But here Jesus goes, he goes right up and he curses the tree and responds in a way, he says, may no fruit ever come from you again. And the tree dies on the spot. And we're going to see a very significant, uncomfortable truth we have to wrestle with this morning. Are you that fruitless fig tree? Are you that fruitless fig tree? So let's begin here in verse 18 through 19. It says, or 17, 18, 19 says, and leaving them, he went out of the city to Bethany and lodged there. And in the morning, as he was returning to the city, he became hungry. And seeing a fig tree by the wayside, he went to it and found nothing on it but only leaves. And he said to it, may no fruit ever come from you again. And the fig tree withered at once. So your first point today, which we're going to see, is a faithless life is a fruitless tree. Now, fig trees, as of this week, fascinate me and slightly terrify me, I think. See, a fig tree is if you guys can see, this is when they're starting to get ready, and They're starting to grow. And then they turn into that. And I guess Nikki has had a fig from Peru. All I've had are fig Newtons. Don't think it's the same. And Nikki says it's like eating candy. I want some figs in my backyard now. Bring it on, birds. I'm growing a fig tree, okay? It's a fig tree. Now, what's fascinating about the fig tree is it is the third tree mentioned in the Bible. Tree of knowledge, good and evil. Tree of life. Fig tree. You know what they use for figs? To cover themselves. Can you go back a slide for me? Sorry, the clicker doesn't work on backwards. See how big the leaves are? Suckers are huge. They are huge leaves. This is the third tree mentioned. This is the closest we will get to the Garden of Eden. The fig. Think about it. It's been around for a long time. There are over 750 kinds of fig trees. Who counted them is what I'm wondering. It's a lot, and a fig is this is what's really weird though, really weirds me out, is this whole thing. So if you want to be grossed out in just an incredible way, because it's weird to me, okay? Me and Wasp and I, we don't have a good relationship, okay? All stemming from me hitting the wasp nest with a rock, and they decided to let me know they didn't appreciate that. Wasp and I have issues with each other, okay? Well, I guess most fig trees have a relationship with a type of wasp, where the wasp go into the fig to have its babies and stuff, leaves the fig, brings with it the male pollen to go back into another fig to pollinate it. Yeah. Uh-huh. I guess it eats the wasp. It's not like when you cut it open, you're like, oh, look, there's a wasp. Because that'd be gross. But I guess that's how it's done it. If there's 20 kinds of wasps that fertilize and do the thing with 700 kinds of the fig trees. So most of them have this weird relationship with a wasp. Because I guess, like most flowers that go out, and then the bees can go inside, the flower and gets the pollen, and they're like, oh, and then they go to the next plant and they pollinate it. The fig tree, I guess, it's like inside out. So the flower's inside. So poor male wasp, they go in, they're hatched, and their whole life consists of mating with the female eggs inside, and then trying to dig out of the fig and dying in the process. And then the female wasp is like, I'll take it from here, and finishes the rest of the way and goes and does the thing. Isn't that weird? Okay, my mind is blown. But this is how they pollinate. Back and forth. Now, every once in a while, so it has multiple harvests. It'll do about 2 to 3. This is on average, okay? Not all fig trees are like this, and I do not consider myself a fig expert, okay? So just bear in mind that you're like, that's not right. I'm right for what I read about my figs, not necessarily about the figs you will come across, because there's a bunch of them, okay? And so I guess at times there are female fruits and there are male fruits. Do you know that? We eat the female fruits because they're yummy. The male fruits are gross. It's like an image of life. Picture of men. Wait, no, sorry, that's the wrong direction with that one. It is but I guess that's what it is. And so the male fruits, they have their purpose. They do their things. But I guess that's not usually considered fruit. Because you bite into it, you're like, whoa. And so sometimes you'll come under a tree and you will have a lot more of the male, sort of the more bitter fruit, and not a lot of the good, juicy fruit. And that's what happens. So we really don't know how this played out. So Jesus goes underneath the tree, and he's looking, and he expects to see fruit. Now, Mark says in his account that it was actually before season. So it's possible that Jesus was using this fig tree as a picture of life and saying, oh, not a fig, and then cursed it. I don't necessarily buy into that he expected the tree to bear fruit. However it looked and whatever's going on. And so what I tend to believe, it was possible that it was like, see, here's a sycamore tree, which is actually a fig tree. Zacchaeus was a wee. You guys know that story? Okay, yeah, remember that song? If you don't, go online. It's a great song, a lot of fun. And so it's quite possible there's this tree. It's not really in somebody's yard. It's just sitting out there, and he goes under, and he looks, and he's like, okay, this is supposed to have fruit. I don't see any fruit. What's going on here? And so my thought is, and I'm not willing to die on this, but I believe he walked under the tree, and what he looked is he saw a bunch of male fruit, uneatable, unedible fruit. And he's like, so my thought is the wasp got lost. They didn't really know what they were making. And they produced a male fig tree. And God is like, where's the fruit? You look like you were to have fruit. You are growing. There's supposed to be something here that I can eat. And you have failed as a tree. And he curses the tree. This can seem a little extreme. I had one of my teens ask me here about a month ago. He's like, I read the story of the fig tree, and what is going on with that? I said, that is a great question. Because you see the fig, and it can seem a little extreme. Right? I mean, don't you think? Simmer down, Jesus. That was a good tree. And he curses the whole thing, and it creates a reaction. And the disciples, I can only imagine them just watching this thing like, I mean, we don't really know what happened, but it began to wither at once, and what they witnessed shocked them. See, Jesus responds to a fruitless tree with a curse. If this tree could not produce what it was supposed to produce, then it was better off dead. And I looked into seeing if there's any significance, is there any giant significance with fruit and in Israel and the Old Testament, stuff like that? And not really. So I'm not going to try to read in all of this meaning. But I think what we can catch right here is if a tree is not producing what it should be doing, then the tree is pointless. It needs to die. See, a life, and we'll see this more, but a life that is living like it's producing fruit, but it's not, is a life that is displeasing to Jesus. In my mind, living like a smaller tree producing a little fruit would be better than looking like a giant sycamore fig that produces nothing. An image is not as important to Jesus as what you're actually producing. I believe that we'll see, especially as it plays out, that the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the nation of Israel, I think, had become a fruitless tree. They looked and they acted like they were God followers. They looked like they were a good tree. But there was no fruit. And as a result, the nation of Israel was dying. They were fruitless, and Jesus had no more time for a nation that was rejecting him. I try to think about now, how do we look at this and we see this, and so I was trying to think, like, how do we bring this into, sort of our lives, and I came up with this sort of thing. So I've noticed that there are a few stages of what I call going to church, all right? Now, bear in mind, these stages have been observed under stringent, hard research, of the highest ethical standards. I came up with this a few hours ago. So, but you guys are okay. So, and you guys can think about it in your own church experience, all right? So when you go to a brand new church, what do you typically do about the church? You check it out. You're checking it out, okay? And you do that, and then over time, you're like, okay, they don't seem too scary. You start to commit, slowly. And then after you commit, you then are committed. You know who you are. We're like, I am here, there. And then we have the concluding, and they have pretty much been here so long, they pretty much met Jesus when he started this church. Like Debbie. You're pretty much here when it started. And Gary and Julie, you guys have been here for a while, right? How many years have you been here? Now you just said that.
Over 76 years. I was here before I was born.
Yeah. It's pretty impressive, okay? And so there's people who've been around. So you have these four groups of people, right? Now, when it comes to the rest of us, is we look. So when somebody is checking a church out, all right, we have no idea if they have a relationship with Jesus or not, right? We have what they tell us and what we can observe, but we have no idea. And then we sort of in our own minds get an idea, well, they probably might be a Christian as they get committed, okay? And then they become definitely a Christian, by the time they're committed, all right? This is just generally how we think. And I was looking at this verse, and when I was 15 years old, I was an example of a committed follower of Jesus that was actually bearing no fruit. How does that work? Well, I really wasn't a committed follower of Jesus. See, when I was at the age of 8, I had gotten, and I put this in quotes, saved. I, in essence, said a prayer, didn't believe it, didn't even understand it. And I was pretty much sent through an assembly line of kids getting saved. And I thought I was saved because they told me I was saved. Okay, it's a sweet, heaven bound, I'm on the way. And I had no idea what was going on. So I lived like it, and I studied it. And I knew a whole lot of Bible. I knew a whole lot of theology and doctrine, even well before I was high school. I had some good teachers, and I just ate it up. I just liked it. But when I was about 15 years old, God had begun to work in my life through a variety of things, and I began to look and realize, there's something really missing. See, I looked like a committed follower. I was teaching classes. I knew probably more stuff than most of the adults there did. No, not just say most. There's some who's really smarter than I was. And I could argue the Bible with the best of them. I was a 15-year-old kid. I knew everything, okay? And so we go, and I was definitely, most people would have looked at me, and you know what they'd have thought? He is definitely a Christian. But I was a tree that wasn't bearing any fruit. And if Jesus would have come down and said, hey, what are you doing for me? Do you have any good fruit? He'd have found nothing. And I was completely deserving of being cursed. At the age of 15, I began to realize something was missing. I realized that I was a sinner and that I needed Jesus Christ in my life. And I accepted Jesus Christ October 17th of my sophomore year of high school. And I was baptized a week later. And I'm saying this to you guys is some of us have been around church for so long that most people assume that we are definitely a Christian. And we're scared of what people will think. And so we keep putting on the facade and trying to make ourselves a bigger and bigger and bigger tree with heavier branches so no one can actually look inside and realize I'm actually dead on the inside. I have no fruit. I'm not bearing it. And so I want to say, if that is you this morning, and you've just been putting up a tree, and you have no relationship with Jesus Christ, and you've been around the block for many, many years, and most people think you are definitely a Christian, I want to say it is okay to come forward and say, I am that fruitless fig tree. It is okay. We will rejoice in the fact that from now on in your life, if you turn your life over to Jesus, you will no longer be fruitless, but you'll be bearing fruit. So let's keep going. All right, and we're going to start, you guys will see all this shaping up here. So when the disciples saw it, they marveled, saying, how did the fig tree wither at once? And Jesus answered them, truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what has been done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, it will happen. And whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith. There's two very important things here in these verses. First, the disciples ask, how is this possible? A few years ago, my favorite college, Auburn, they had these two giant willow trees located that would typically hang out over this intersection, and a fan from another school decided he would do a massive prank and lay in tree poison secretly underneath those two trees. They killed him. And the rival school and everything, everyone tried to rush and try to fix it and try to rescue these things. They couldn't do it. That was even tree killer takes a while to kill the tree. It took excruciating time to kill these trees. It had been going on for months, and no one had any idea until it was told to them on the radio that it had happened. And I say this is good established trees that are bearing fruit do not just die overnight. They don't. And so they ask, how is this impossible thing possible? That's what the disciples are asking here. How is this possible? And Jesus says, not only can you do this impossible thing, you can also pick up a mountain and sling it into the ocean. What? Paxton. Shh. Everyone's looking at him, so I had to draw him out. But how can you do an impossible thing like this? That's the question the disciples are asking. How is this impossible thing possible? And I think this helps to see what fruit is. Because a lot of times we hear about fruit. Christian's supposed to have a fruitful life. A Christian's supposed to produce fruit. Christian, okay, how do you do that? Because I'm pretty sure we're not fruit. I guess I'm not a Christian. Can't produce my fruit. What is it? I think this is a very good definition of the fruit is fruit. God is referring it as fruit. Yeah. Fruit is, wow. I have it right here on my page. There he goes. Fruit is God-generated work in your life. Something that only God can do in your life is fruit. Can we, apart from Jesus Christ, cannot do anything good that will measure any sort of righteousness or blessings. We can try as hard as we want, and there's a lot of people in the world who has done a lot of good things. There are people who have performed and done so many good works, but from the standpoint of what God is doing, they're not going to measure up. They're not spiritually good fruit. See, good is God-generated work in your life, because what Jesus says here is when you have faith, you can do something impossible. Now, in the history of Christendom, I have yet to hear of a disciple of Jesus picking up a mountain with his brain and launching it into the ocean. Has any of you guys seen that? Heard about it? Could you imagine how weird? I mean, I'm pretty sure we'd have seen something in the textbook. And thus I sawest a big mountainist floating in the sky, landing in thus water. That's how they talked in the olden days, okay? So, haven't heard it. I mean, that's why I'm saying Jesus is not, yes, through faith, impossible things can become possible. That is fruit. When impossible things that you could not do apart from the work of God in your life, you're able to do. You are unable to save yourself apart from the work of Jesus Christ in your life. And you know what that has done through? Faith. That starts everything going. You could never have done that apart from Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ goes and he rescues you through faith. There's result, now you can start producing fruit. And the good that you do through the work of the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ in your life, that is the fruit. It's God-generated work in your life. But the only way that God-generated work can happen, what Jesus says in your life, is if you have faith. If you have faith. And do not doubt. See, Jesus says it in two ways. One, faith is a positive way of speaking this, and doubting is a negative way. Do not doubt. Have faith. Have faith. Do not doubt. Faith is a resolved confidence in something. I know there's a lot of definitions, but it is a resolved confidence that something will do what they're supposed to do. It is this resting in. Just like when you sit down in a chair, you have a confidence that the chair is going to hold your weight. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Negative is doubt, okay? So it's this doubt, and a doubt is I believe it's the opposite, but it's a hesitancy that whatever the object is or whatever it is won't do what it's supposed to do. So faith is resolved confidence. Doubt is a hesitancy that it might not. Doubt eats away at your faith. Because you think it's supposed to do something. You're calm, cool, collected. I believe this is going to do. And then you're like, but I don't know if it's going to do it. That's doubt. And Jesus says, if you have faith and do not doubt, God will be able to work through you to make impossible things possible. Faith is what makes this possible. I just want to say, faith opens up access and avenues that were previously unavailable to you. Because as we rest in what God can do and not what I can do, as we sit on what God is doing through us and how He's doing it, and we stop taking credit for it, and we act like, well, I'm the one who's doing this good stuff. It's me. It's about me. I'm the one doing this. And as we rest on what Jesus is doing, it begins to in essence, it sort of unlocks a potential, okay? And I want to say that we can say in Christendom that there have been numerous mountains that have been moved as a result of somebody's faith. Christianity has reached countries and people groups that there's no way they should have heard about Jesus. I don't know about you, but we've watched what God has done in the lives of people we've been praying for. We've watched immovable mountains broken down and changed. So what faith is that it is a resolved confidence that this mountain that has been placed before me, this mountain is standing in the way of what God has for me, and it is a belief that it will be moved. If we know we are supposed to go in a direction because we have been led by God this way, and there's a mountain in our way that we can't move ourselves, then what faith is God has me wanting to go this way, and as a result, that means this mountain, this tree, whatever it is, will be moved so I am still able to go where God is leading me. That is what faith is. It's a belief that God will be God, and he will do and move the things that are in his way of doing his will. Those will be moved. But doubt eats at that. I think doubt sort of creeps in and it gets underneath our foundation. It feels strong, but our foundation feels strong, but over time, this doubt has been washing it away. And then we go to stand on it, we realize we don't have it, and we fall. I think doubt sometimes can be it probably is the biggest enemy of Christianity. Because when we get saved right away, to be honest, it seems like our faith can't get any higher and any more strong. It feels good, but over time, bad stuff happens to us. And more bad stuff happens to us. And more bad stuff happens to us. And we're looking like, God, I thought you were going to move. I thought this was a problem. I thought this was a mountain. God, why aren't you doing stuff? We begin to question. As soon as that happens, it begins to erode our faith. I'm a victim of it. And how many of you are? You just look back and you're like, whoa. I thought I was a step there. And you fall. And you go, and that's doubt. It eats it up. And where we really see where doubt creeps in is here in verse 20, 22. And he says, whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith. And I want to be very careful with this because I am not of the mindset that just because God doesn't answer the prayer in the way you want it to, it doesn't mean you didn't have faith. Because when we can look at this, it can look like very much an either or. I prayed, God didn't answer. That means either God is not reliable, there's doubt, or that I didn't have enough faith. Doubt again. We get sort of this either or thing, okay? Or like, well, I must stink as a Christian, or I must this because it feels like God isn't doing this. And it feels, and so we can picture faith and prayer as this either or thing that happens in our life. And in essence, we treat prayer and treat faith and prayer as an assembly line. We shove a little faith in there, shove a little God power, about 15 minutes for God to answer. Go. Boop. Ha, answered prayer. Does prayer work like that? If you guys said yes, shame on you, because it doesn't, okay? Prayer never works like that. It's like, okay, Asman, press the button, and we expect, boom, God's answer right there. We treat faith, we treat prayer like an assembly line. Well, God didn't answer my prayer. God must not exist. Oh, God didn't answer my prayer. He must hate me. Oh, God didn't answer the prayer in the way I liked. Yep, must be me. My assembly line is broken. And it leaves doubt, and then we notice that it begins to affect our relationship with God and begins to face our relationship with others. Well, let me tell you that faith-centered prayer cannot be manufactured. It must be grown. See, prayer like a fig tree is far more complicated. Requires a lot more pieces that are far beyond our explanation just to bear fruit. If you think about it, sometimes it looks like that fig tree is going to bear fruit, but instead it's one of those lame male fruits. Blech. But the male fruit does serve a very good purpose, and it does, and it helps. And at times, these are the worst part, but at times when we're trying to bear, fig fruit, we have to have these stupid wasps that have to dig into the fruit and die inside it. And through that, that's not pleasant. There are times where things are really hard. They're really twisted. And then other times we'll go and we've been praying and we have been diligent in trying to have a resolved faith in what God is doing. And God is using that faith and that steady to grow the roots and how he's going to answer this prayer as it's spreading and the tree is becoming to get healthy. And then what happens with a fig tree is it grows and it's the springtime and it's ready to harvest and we only get like 2 fruits. Like, God, that wasn't enough. But we forget that a fig tree, actually its big harvest, it has the second time around. So sometimes we expect God to answer in this amazing way right off the bat. But no, God is just using that because it's part of the cycle. It's part of how the fig tree grows and develops. And sometimes our prayers take a little more time to be answered. See, it's not an assembly line where you just shove all the parts in and you press the button and it goes. But faith-centered prayer, treat it like a tree that is growing and getting itself established and set up. Trust that God is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Just like that fig tree has to trust that the wasps are going to do what they do. Be weird. Be wasp. And this takes time in our life. In some seasons, it'll feel like our trees are bearing wimpy fruit. But we have to continuously trust that God is working and he's going to produce a great harvest of fruit where it's only where we can stop and look and we can look and say, God is doing what only God can do. God is making this impossible thing possible in our life. And it takes faith. We have people right now whose faith, hey Seth, mom, whose faith right now is struggling. And I honestly say that like when we're going through difficulty, praying in faith is one of the hardest things to do. Because we're just hoping that this is the one moment that God decides to use an assembly line in our life and pop out what we want. But he doesn't, does he? It's a tree. And it takes time. And we think we know what is best, but God does in our life, and he's trying to bear fruit. And at times there are people who are really struggling, and their doubt is hard, and they can't see how God is doing something. And I think that's the time where we, as a fellowship, as a Christian community, can pray. We can pray, and we can pray in faith for them. As you guys probably heard through the prayer circle is Ray and Barbara, there has been some dramatic complications to the adoption of Daniel, who we have come and lived with, and he is very much a part of our family. And Ray and Barbara right now are having as you guys can imagine, investing that much time, and then hitting a mountain that looks completely immovable, where you spend so much of your effort to go and to adopt, and then just something feels like it takes it out. And from a human standpoint, that is a mountain. And what I would like to do in concluding with this sermon, this message, is I would like to ask Barbara and Ray and Seth, you can come on up too, man. And I would, here in a minute, I would like to ask the church to come up as well. And I want us to all to examine the doubts in our minds and to pray in faith that we will see the